Hugh Beatty? Hugh Beatty
Here.
and John McLaughlin.
No, John.
I think John's out of town. Yeah, he's I'll take last time he was a little bit late. Maybe he'll swing in here, but I've tried to get a hold of him and haven't been able to. So I think he may not be around for this meeting. We'll excuse him for now, if that's okay. I'd like to start out by reading our mission statement. The mission of the Chuckanut Community Forest Park District is to ensure the entirety of the property is protected in perpetuity in public ownership with respect to its ecological, recreational, and educational functions, and to serve as a fiscal mechanism through which the district via tax levy will repay the city of Bellingham for the Greenways Endowment Fund loan. This meeting will be recorded. You heard it just go on. Visual and auditory recordings of this meeting will be posted on the CCFPD website. If your camera is on during the meeting, your voice, likeness, and surroundings will be publicly available and viewable on that website. If you choose to speak with your camera off or by calling on a telephone, only your voice will be recorded. Calling the meeting to order. We are having this meeting under the rules of the Open Public Meetings Act, and we're having this meeting due to COVID-19 outbreak and the governor's stay-at-home order. The meeting of the Chuckanut Community Forest Park District is being conducted online via Zoom. I believe you all have a copy of the agenda. I'd like to have you take a minute and review that and see if it is if there are any additions, deletions, or corrections to the agenda as provided. Gentlemen, have you had a chance to look at that agenda? Are there any additions, corrections, or deletions you'd like to recommend to the group?
I would like to ask, under the general public comments, we have a public hearing on budget resolution 22, public hearing on tax levy resolution 21, budget resolution 22 and exhibit A and tax levy. I understand the two last ones. What I don't understand is the budget resolution 22. I wonder if someone could explain that. I don't have it on my screen at the moment.
That there's always two resolutions, one for the tax levy and one for the budget resolution. And exhibit A is the actual budget and the resolution about it is, so they were all in that one document I sent to you guys about the budget. Does that make sense now, John? And they're not really a subset of the general public comments. I realize that's the way it looks from the way I did the agenda. I was just trying to set them apart because they were a special thing we don't usually do. So.
Okay, that's clear to me. I would like to make a motion that we approve the agenda as it's laid out. It will be a big agenda. We'll have a lot to do and kind of massage it as long, perhaps. But I'll make a motion that we do approve it as it stands.
John Brown has moved. Do I hear a second?
Second.
Thank you. We have a motion and a second. Is there further discussion about that? Would anybody like to take issue with anything in that agenda, or we shall accept it? Hearing none, I'll call the question. All those in favor, please signify by saying aye or raising
Aye.
or both. Great. Thank you, gentlemen. Passes unanimously. We've got quite a few more people joining us. I'd just like to introduce both Robin Albro, who's our clerk, and our Bob Carmichael, who's our counsel. Anyone else that'd like to introduce themselves, we're more than happy to have that. Kirk, an old friend of the meeting. You come pretty often. Welcome, Kirk. It's good to see you. Of course, John Blethyn is often here as well, and works with the park board. Rita Fox, would you like to introduce yourself? Feel free to, or if you don't want to, that's totally fine too. Great. And Rita, do you want to introduce yourself? All right. Lane Potter and Nicole from the city, would either of you like to just say who you are? They're both from the Parks program. And
Sorry, this is Rita. I just got my microphone going.
Okay, Rita, thanks. It's complicated, isn't it?
Yeah,
Welcome. We're glad to have you here. And
thank you.
then John McLaughlin has just joined us, so please let our minutes reflect that Mr. McLaughlin has now joined us as well. And then Nicole is our Parks Director. We're happy to have you here. Thank you for joining us. And then Mr. Geyer, also an old friend of this organization. You've been around for a long time. Bill, did you want to say anything?
Yeah, thank you. I've got the white hair to prove it. No, taxpayer and property owner within the district. I do have a point of clarification to the chair, if I may ask, regarding the agenda.
Please do. Bill.
Thank you. In your general public comments section, will you have time where you separate out the opportunity for general public comments that are outside of the budget discussion? And then secondly, will the budget resolution discussion and the tax levy resolution be discussed as separate public hearings to comment on them individually?
So yes, we typically have a general comments at the beginning, and anything that's specifically on the agenda, we ask you to hold those comments until those particular items come up on the agenda. So there will
Okay.
be a general time at the beginning, then there will be time for comments at each of the public hearings.
Great. And so the budget and the tax levy will be considered in separate hearings? Is that how you'll proceed?
Bob, are they actually
Yes.
separate hearings or they're different?
Yes.
They're all at this meeting. I think they are actually separate hearings that we open and close individually. Is that correct, Bob?
Correct.
Yeah, so that's true. So
Thank you.
You bet. Thank you.
You bet.
I don't see anybody else on the list there, so I'd like to move on to the public hearing, the public comment period. So anybody that wants to comment now in general for 3 minutes, they're welcome to do that. I will time you and warn you when you get close. These would be comments of a general nature. If your comments are about any of the public hearing items, the tax levy resolution, Exhibit A and our other details, those will come up later and you can hold your comments. You'll have an opportunity to comment on those at a later time. So if anybody would like to make general comments, we'd be happy to hear those right now.
Hey, Commissioner James, this is Bill Geyer, if I may.
Please, Bill.
Okay, thank you. Again, Bill Geyer, 1008 16th Street, resident here in the district. The treasurer's report later on under new business is informative to everyone tonight. I think it has a clear foundation for a couple policies I would like the commissioners to consider and ultimately adopt. The first policy I would like you to consider is to pay off the current balance of the current city loan that's owed in full by end of year. I'd like you to consider a policy in doing that. Your treasurer's report identifies that amount with sufficient unencumbered balance of cash to more than cover that outstanding debt. And the second policy I'd like the commissioners to consider would be to adopt a resolution that's stating a goal for 2022, that the goal is to dissolve the Parks District within that time frame and to take all necessary steps to pay off any obligations and complete any required tasks to accomplish that. I think the district has fulfilled its purpose, and I think it's timely for you to consider both of those policies. But thank you for that opportunity, Commissioner James.
Yeah, thank you for your input, and we can certainly consider those as we move through those issues. Thank you. Are there other people that would like to make general comments with regard to the meeting of items not on the specific agenda already?
I can make a few comments, if I may.
Sure, please.
Well, first, I would agree with the things that Bill Geyer just said. Fully agree with those, although I assume those would be actually part of the budget discussion. A couple issues that I have outside the budget resolution. The last meeting, Nicole Oliver indicated the likelihood that a consultant sought by the board would largely be redundant with the consultation already being sought by the city. With all due respect to those who have responded to the board's RFQ, a separate consultant is likely an unnecessary expense. At most, the board, I think, should consider working with the city to split the cost of a single consultant acceptable to the Master Plan Steering Committee and to the board. Also, at the last meeting, a motion withdrawn without a second, comparing the 82-acre Chuckanut Community Forest to the relatively remote Stimson Family Nature Reserve was made with the intent of excluding dog access to the forest. The Chuckanut Community Forest is a community forest, entirely surrounded by neighborhoods and accessed largely by individuals and pets living in those surrounding neighborhoods, unlike the Stimson Reserve. The recent board-sponsored informal survey found that 1 dog uses the forest for every 3 people. I hope that the board will advise the Master Plan Steering Committee to allow dog access, which I support, and I've mentioned that to the board any number of times in the past, even allowing off-leash at least on secondary trails. Conservation agreement signed by the forest does not require, but allows for, quote, off-leash dog trails and centralized forested obstacle exercise area, end quote. Historical access to the forest by people with their dogs largely off leash while still preserving diverse wildlife and vegetation speaks to the minimal impact such utilization has had on the forest and allows the forest to act as a true community forest. Arguably, people have actually had more negative impact on the trails in the forest than dogs have.
Thank you very much for your comment. We'll certainly consider that. Are there other people who would like to have a chance to make general comments that are not on our specifics on our agenda?
Sorry. Yeah.
Hearing none, I'll close this part of our meeting and move on to the specific hearings. We'll be happy to hear comments about these specific proposals. I'd like to take them up one at a time. The first, I'd like to open the public hearing on the Budget Resolution 22 and Exhibit A, the open public hearing and public comments for this process. If you've had a chance, I know that everybody had the opportunity to read these, but this is a very specific thing. So this is going to be the public hearing on resolution number 22 and Exhibit A. I'd like to open that hearing. And initially, we'd like to hear public comment on that proposal. Robin, do you want to summarize resolution 22 and Exhibit A for us?
Okay, just let me pull them up here.
Sure.
So the resolution is basically just to hold a public, it says that we held a public hearing for the proposed budget for the 2022 fiscal year and a possibility held a public hearing regarding its proposed budget for the 2022 fiscal year and the possibility of an increase in property tax revenues. And also, and then this just, it says the attached Exhibit A is hereby adopted as a 2022 district budget. And there are 4 options for budgets. And we could even do something else, but these are the things that Bob Carmichael's office came up with and I worked with them on. And so the zero levy, the main difference between these levies has to do with 2 parts. One is the risk pool, or I don't know of a better word for it, but for the conservation easement for the organization that takes that over, the Whatcom Land Trust. And so we varied in price on that. On the zero levy budget, it was $65,000. On the $100,000 levy, it was $164,000. And the next 2 levies, the $136,000 and the $170,000, was a $200,000 range. And as we don't know the exact number it will be, and it ranges from 50 to 200,000. And then the other main difference between these was the just the size of our reserve, which is approximately 25,000, except for the 170,000 levy where it's 42,000. And everything else is similar, except for the size of the actual levy. Does anybody have any questions about that? Or
Or
want to say anything more clarifying?
if the commissioners would speak to that issue, if anybody has any questions, we should talk about that now, and then we'll have some public comment. So I think Robin has summarized well the fact we have several options at different levels. They reflect the differences in the amount that we would have in reserve, and they reflect the differences in what the cost might be of contributing to a risk pool to defend the park, the actual conservation easement, should it be challenged, or should we run into difficulties with the city or others about the issue. We would have a reserve fund we would pay into a risk pool, essentially, which would then be utilized in perpetuity to defend the property. That's the difference between the four, essentially. The amount in reserve and the cost that would be expected to cover the defense of the conservation easement ongoing. So commissioners, do you have any questions or comments? John?
I do. I think I favor the second option personally, just to cover ourselves when it comes down to what we may need to cover financially. Anyway, that's what I say. I went through these options today, and that's where I sit. My mind could be changed, but that's where I'm at.
Mhm. And Mr. Brown or Mr. Beatty, any thoughts initially?
I find that Mr. Geyer and Mr. Golden has agreed with that. I find that Mr. Geyer's analysis of these figures is on the surface is very persuasive, and I tend to lean in the direction of a zero levy. I'm curious in that event if our attorney or if any other members feel that we would be exposing ourselves if we adopted a zero levy, if we would be in a vulnerable position. That's one question. And the second question is, at this time next year, at this exact date, assuming that we might, let's say assume that we do adopt a zero levy for this year, could we then adopt a very minimal levy next year to cover expenses that we didn't anticipate?
I think that's a question for Mr. Carmichael.
I would say if we haven't dissolved by then, yes, we could. But before we get too far into questions and discussion of board members, I think it would be better to hear from the public open up the public hearing on it. And then after the public speaks, the board can have a full discussion.
I was not looking so much for opinions ultimately, but any questions about it is what I was hoping to have right now from the.
I know, but that's not the direction it was going.
I know, yeah. And we should definitely get input from the public. I know a few people, Mr. Geyer has had provided written comments, a few people have provided written comments, but I think the purpose of the hearing is really to hear the comments of the general public that wanted to attend the meeting. So let's go ahead.
Excuse me, Mr. Chair. I see Commissioner McLaughlin does have his hand raised.
I can't always see down on the end of the thing. It's great. Commissioner.
Yes, thank you. I do have a question, and that Robin went through the options for us quite well. My question is, what are the anticipated expenses or other financial obligations we are likely to encounter? So that could include both the fee that an entity like the land trust might require for transfer of an easement, the expenses that we would likely to incur, the operating expenses we would incur between now and when the commission or the park district would dissolve, potential legal costs that might occur between now and when we transfer the easement, and anything else. I'm just wondering, before we start picking an amount on the levy, I'd like some clarity on the amount any levy and any reserves we have would be needed to cover. So what are anticipated expenses or financial obligations?
I can answer part of that, John. In having a discussion with the land trust earlier, they identified a cost that would be necessary for them to accept the protection of the park in perpetuity. They anticipated that legal contribution that would be required was between $50,000 and $200,000. And at the time, they believed that it was going to be closer to $200,000, given the particular agreement we had. That will depend upon exactly how that agreement is renegotiated, how hard it might be to defend. So I think the variable there is still undefined. The city was not interested in doing that before the master plan was completed. So that leaves that really very undefined. If it's the current agreement, it would be the $200,000. If it is a more focused agreement, which I think there's a good chance of coming forward with. I mean, so far the work of the steering committee has been very much in line with a very much reduced scope, and one that would be easier to defend. It might be closer to the $50,000, but the range is clearly still there. And it could be that it would require up at the $200,000. The other expenses that I can think of is there are things that it isn't yet clear to me what the city is willing or capable to do financially on some aspects of both the planning process and the initial protection process. For example, there is some money in their budget. I'm glad Nicole is here so she can speak to it perhaps. I know that part of the money that they set aside, about $10,000 of the $25,000 they put into this has already been earmarked for the facilitation of the process. So far as the graphics, which by that I mean the signage and other things that would need to be done, would be another major expense. I think we've heard from everybody in the hearings we've held, and certainly in discussions of the committee, that signage is critically important to facilitate and ensure that the property is used correctly. We need not just to tell people where they're at, but we need to also inform people about what the rules of engagement, if you enter the space, what's expected of you. And for example, that kind of signage could be something the city could pay for potentially if they have the budget. If they don't have the budget, then I think we would be able to and would be expected to provide that level of funding to ensure that that happens. Other things are that a new bike trail has been identified near the southeast corner of the property that is a very destructive activity, I think, as we all know. when jumps are put in and when a trail is put in, it is an avenue for invasive species to enter it, and it's an avenue for activities that further destroy the value of the park. So I think there are those kind of things that will need to be addressed, and either the city can do it with their budget, or potentially we could provide budget support for that. And then the other known expense is going to be the actual development and implementation of the long-term master plan itself. And the city has $25,000 in the budget so far. We've budgeted $30,000. I think that estimates that we got early on ran to $100,000 actually with that process. The city has a highly variable, as they've described to us, approach to this based on their budget ability. They may do a very abbreviated planning effort in some parks in the past, or they can do a much more robust one. And I think it's generally been the opinion of most people on the commission to have a more robust process rather than a less robust process to ensure the achievement of the goals of our mission. So are there other expenses that people are aware of that we might have?
Got a consultant.
Pardon me?
Just the $30,000 consultant fee.
That's already been approved. Yeah, right.
Well, it's listed in there. It's listed in 2023. It's not, no. No, excuse me. It is listed. It's actually listed, added to this year.
Right.
And a couple of other things we added were negotiation, legal fees for negotiating the conservation easement with the city of Bellingham, and negotiating fees for the handing over the conservation easement. We also included some money in case we get a public records request. And just in all the regular expenses, I tried to keep them close to what I think they would be based on past years, but also give us a little leeway in there because things do change. So trying to look ahead a bit. So any other questions, John?
No, I think that helps. It's what's revealing in what both you and Frank said is the major source of uncertainty is the cost of transferring the easement. And the major factor causing that uncertainty is the status or the content of that easement, which we decided to defer in deference to Parks Department workload and concerns. And so the implication of that now is substantial budgetary uncertainty, making our decision tonight much more difficult.
That's correct, John. Well, just more uncertainty.
I think we would still have a fair amount of uncertainty about the amount of contribution required by the land trust. We really don't know. They gave us quite a broad range, and that range was irrespective of a change in the terms of the conservation easement. So while I think that it should help us with the cost by having those terms more narrowly tailored as to the uses along the lines of what the board approved, we don't really know. We don't really know what the land trust is going to say they need to take on the conservation easement.
Or if they don't do it, what other partner would require of us? You know, the university or other partners we've considered. Yeah.
So the land trust didn't provide any information what would determine the amount? They just gave a range without clarification?
No, I think that Bob's partially right there. There will be other financial considerations of the land trust, but I think the biggest cost is going to be the contribution to what essentially they have as a risk pool that they make so that they'll have the legal ability to defend the conservation easement. That's the
Right, but I guess what I was trying to get at is if the anticipated value within that range is entirely undetermined, okay, that's $150,000 uncertainty. If it really depends on the status or language in the easement, then I think we could project that as this easement stands currently, it would be at the high end of that range. And if it could be negotiated more narrowly, then it would be somewhere lower than that.
Exactly.
That may be, but I'm not sure I entirely agree with that. That we're making some assumptions.
Right.
And
That's why I'm asking.
yeah, I know. That's why I'm saying, because it's a good question, and it's a logical inference, but I don't think we know enough we don't have enough data to make that inference. We just don't know what the land trust is going to require with a risk pool contribution, irrespective of the language of that easement. I don't know. I haven't had discussions. Nobody's actually, to my knowledge, has actually taken it to them and said, okay, what do you think it's going to cost with this language? What do you think it would cost with that language? And that would even make a difference at all. I don't know the answer to that question.
So that would be an argument in favor of having the resources at the higher end.
Well, again, that's up to you. That's
Right.
judgment.
Any funds remaining would of course be disposed of, probably going to the city, probably going with some negotiation about what that money would be spent for, but it without any certainty about what it was spent for, is my understanding.
Is there any mechanism of a taxpayer refund?
I don't think there is. I think the money will go to the city, and what it will go to is generally the general fund, unless we negotiate some specific request that they would have to agree to voluntarily. There would be we have no ability to tell them what to do with it, but we do have the ability to request and ask what they, express a preference for what it might be spent for. For example, activities within the forest, which I think
Hopefully,
would be in keeping with the wishes of the people that put the money there in the first place.
what-
Nicole.
Thank you. I guess I'm a little bit not sure where or how to provide feedback and comments. There's been a lot of things said just so far that are a little bit beyond like a typical public hearing. So maybe I could just offer a little bit of thoughts based on what I've heard so far, if that's all right with you.
Please do. If you need any clarity or clarification would be
Okay.
appreciated.
Well, in looking at and familiarizing myself with the terms of what's going to happen in the next year, we do intend to complete this, and I think we're well underway to have a complete draft master plan ready to present. The key components we'll be presenting in a public open house that will be the second week of December. We'll get additional feedback on those components, and we'll be putting together the final plan by early next year. As far as costs associated with the plan, I believe that we do have enough funding to complete a master plan. That has nothing to do with actually funding for creating and implementing that plan. That will require additional funding that we certainly will be able to fund through our park fund revenue sources, and do anticipate that, including creating the signs. We'll continue to dismantle bike trails as we have already, and I would love to know where that additional one is. I didn't know there was a new one. I thought that activity had kind of died down. So please tell us where that is and we'll get rid of it right away. It seems to me that your best bet would be to aim to have the $200,000 left over at the end, that would cover your the risk pool for your the transfer to the land trust. If you aim for that high end and aim to have that ending balance after your costs be that 200,000, that seems to me a logical thing. I also believe that the negotiating the terms of the easement are going to be very straightforward. I think we've proven through the public process and the master planning process that we're all on the same page for conservation, restoration as the core focus. We're going to be eliminating all those additional uses out of that easement. We haven't even embraced or even explored any of those uses in the master planning process because it was clear from the get-go, the steering committee, and then was subsequently supported by the public input that we received, that we really do want to keep focus on minimal development, restoration, education, access for recreation, those kinds of things. I think we have a couple of things that we need to dive a little bit deeper on, and any work that we do as we implement this plan in the future will require a full permitting and environmental evaluation based on the rules that are in place when we do that additional work. I think that we're poised to have a final draft plan by early next year, and we'll be taking it through the process. So that's just my thoughts right now off the top of my head. And I do think that that 25,000 that we set aside for the planning effort is going to be sufficient to complete the plan. And it does not include any implementation. That will be additional funding that we certainly will do. And you are under I don't think the district is under any obligation, nor is it part of your purpose to be implementing the final master plan.
I don't think there was an interest in implementing the final master plan. I think there was an interest in preserving the quality of the property while it's still under our care, and in partnership with the city, of course. Yeah. So the other addition, just to be clear, I think the things that are being specified are really the cost to whoever the conservation easement holder is of legal defense. That's a major cost. And then the other three things were the legal cost of negotiating with the city over the final details of that conservation easement, the renegotiation of those, and that seems imminent. What the planning process entails is quite different than what the current conservation easement covers. And then also the legal cost of the negotiations with whoever the conservation easement holder long-term will be. So those two legal costs, I think, need to be provided for. And then finally, we had one public information request, and I forget the exact cost, but I think it ran to nearly $10,000 or so. And I think we need to anticipate there could be future public information requests, and they're quite expensive. I think we should definitely have the funds to do that should it occur again. So those are the costs, at least as I see them discussed so far.
I wonder if I could ask Nicole, has the park department hired a consultant for working on the master plan?
We have a facilitator who has some additional consulting resources that we anticipate using to finalize once we have the core components and we're ready to finalize it, that we intend to use them to complete the plan.
You're going to use the facilitator to complete the plan?
His company, Peak Sustainability, has other planners and graphic designers, and they do a lot of different types of compilation and planning work. They worked on the climate action plan. They're working with the broadband advisory group. They've done several different types of documents and plans. And again, we are not anticipating having a full entire understanding of exactly where and when and how every single trail is going to operate in the future. But we are going to have our core guiding criteria and phasing that will be used to implement the plan. This is kind of how we normally do things. We create phases. We have early action items that we'll be doing in the early phase. And we're going to be presenting some of this phasing to the steering committee on Friday to kind of lay out a more complete concept that will incorporate some of the work that the Park District has already done to be really specific about the goals and the criteria that should be used for restoration. And then also identifying core main trails, a concept in regards to that, and what kind of things we'd be doing early on that we could do without a lot of additional, that we could do without a lot of like removing or rerouting significant sections of trail. Those types of things we're not going to be able to fully evaluate from at a permitting level without going through a permitting process on each of those different hydrologic functions that we want to reconnect. We're going to have to create a plan that provides the criteria and the goals that each of those improvements would have to accomplish, and then go through and do them one at a time, as I think was really evident by the presentation that was provided at the last steering committee. Even that one boardwalk that we've done that is off of 18th, that is an entry into the forest, was a considerable, significant planning, design, construction, volunteer mitigation effort. And that's one little piece of all of the different ones that are going to be done anytime we want to do an improvement of a trail within that forest. So we can't outline every single bit of the environmental implications of any improvements. What we have to do is confine them and provide clear boundaries and criteria for how we're going to implement the plan. The plan is the plan. It's not exactly how each little piece works. I hope that helps understand.
Sure, yeah. And then the steering committee will actually decide then in some formal way at the next meeting?
Well, I think the plan is to outline some of the key directions that we've seen so far. We already got a really good feedback on the core outline of the plan from the steering committee, from the notes that I read. I wasn't at the meeting, but I think we have good agreement on the core outline. And now we have a couple of, I think, some pretty unique ideas that we've come up with to present to the steering committee about bikes. And then I think the other question that we're going to need some more feedback from the community is, and to continue to discuss, is what I understand is exactly what we should propose to do with dogs. But right, so those are places that I want to fine tune the open house materials. We're going to create a video that people will be able to watch that will outline the different components of the plan and where we're at right now, and some feedback opportunities. We have some great interactive online feedback loops for the community. So we'll be going out to the community in the middle of December, and we'll refine that content and bring it back. And then we'll be able to put together a complete draft. And I think the steering committee will probably only need to meet one other time at the beginning of next year, is what I think is my hope. Yeah.
May I say, I would like to know from Mr. Carmichael, once the master plan has been approved, presented and approved by council, I gather that it would be approved by council and the mayor and signed off on. If that's so, then, and once the conservation easement has been transferred and negotiations with that are over, at that point, do we petition the city to dissolve? And once we do, how long will that dissolution take to be complete?
In answer to the first part of your question, Park District does not file a petition to dissolve, the city files the petition to dissolve the Park District. So it's just the reverse. So
Okay,
really, it depends on how quickly the city files a petition. The Park District has 1 year to dissolve after the city files the petition for dissolution.
I had one comment I wanted to make on the budget. That was that,
Excuse me, Robin, before we go any further,
okay,
I really enjoyed hearing Nicole Oliver's comments. They were great. They're really important. But I am very uncomfortable with the informal nature of how we're proceeding. We need to open the public hearing on the budget, and I would ask that we do that forthwith and consider Nicole Oliver's comments brought forward as comments on the budget. But let's officially open the public hearing on the budget and recognize members of the public. And then we can talk about it. And Robin can make comments and all the commissioners can make.
Yeah, thank you, Bob. I think
Comments.
that's an excellent point. So I believe that we were ready to open open that hearing. Do we need a motion to do that, Bob?
No, you can, as chair, you can just open it.
Okay, I thought I did. I'll try it again though, but I would like to open the meeting.
The hearing.
Open the hearing on the budget resolution 22 and Exhibit A. I thought that's where we were. And we would, now that we've gotten the commissioners' questions and comments, we would definitely need to open it to the public for all their comments. Bill, you've got your hand up. Please speak up.
Yes, thank you, commissioners. Again, for the record, Bill Geyer, 1008 16th Street. And these are on the budget comments. I'll reserve for the levy later. I did have the opportunity to send an email to the commissioners and the clerk today with my thoughts on this, and I trust that all the commissioners received that.
Mhm.
Okay, great.
Yes.
And thank you. Then I won't go through the extensive detail. The short version was I was making recommendation to reduce the expenses by about $37,000 to a total expense of about $65,000 for the year, but to also within your budget itself recognize that you have, per the district's estimate, you have a beginning cash balance beginning of 2022 of approximately $242,733. That was the number that you published. Of course, it'll change by January 1 by a few dollars. But given that cash balance, and if you have a zero levy, so your Exhibit A that is identified as the zero levy budget is the budget that I am recommending that you adopt with the changes that I've requested by reducing expenses to $65,000. Your end of year balance then will be approximately $177,000. And that's more than enough, I believe, to take care of other obligations. And this is inclusive of paying off the loan. I also would delete the 2023 budget line item because you're only discussing the 2022 budget. And if this dissolution occurs in 2022, there's no need for 23. And that is correct. As I made my citation and per the interlocal agreement, any assets would be transferred to the city upon dissolution. And I just want to make one comment here to the commissioners. The discussion that's evolved here this evening regarding the payment of the risk portfolio or the risk fund needs a lot more robust discussion with the commissioners, because I, like others, would certainly want to see money go towards improvements and not to be consumed by insurance or legal fees. The discussion of the risk pool goes to risk, and that is a level of trust that we either have or don't have with our city elected officials and department heads. I think, as some of the other commissioners have commented tonight, you can reduce that risk substantially, and I would reserve the discussion of that for another time, because I have several ideas on how that can be reduced, because it gets to what level of service that we think the ratepayers of the district needs to have a risk pool. I think it's way overpriced with this suggestion of anywhere north of 50,000, and 200,000 is just absurd. That's my opinion. And I know with a more detailed discussion, I could prove that out. I am aghast that that number has even been thrown at us. So I would ask you, when you take that up, you need to have a very robust discussion with the ratepayers on that issue. But I would request the changes to the budget as I submitted to you in writing. But thank you for the time this evening.
Yeah, thanks. Perfect timing. Thank you. 2 minutes and 55 seconds. Good timing. Thank you, Bill. There's plenty of room for anybody else that would like to make comments that's at the meeting. More than happy to open the discussion to any.
I'd like to comment again.
Please, do.
Once again, I agree with Bill Geyer. I'm not nearly as articulate when it comes to the line item comments on the budget. But you know, from what has already been said, the master plan may be complete sometime early next year. It was said last meeting, and I assume that's still the case, that the so-called loan should be paid off in full by the end of this calendar year. And once both of those are complete, then the town can petition to dissolve the district. And even though the district could have a year to dissolve after that petition, would not seem to be very much reason to continue. And by dissolving more quickly, then legal and other expenses could be saved. So I see the levy and the budget as being tied. I mean, I support the zero levy as well, and at least to the extent that the budget proposal is tied into that, the budget based on the zero levy, I would also tend to support. I think I don't completely understand, and maybe you all could explain better why the district needs to be involved with the cost of the easement transfer. If the district is dissolved, does the easement not dissolve with it, and the city then negotiates with Watcom Land Trust to develop a new easement? But in either case, if Bill Geyer's comments are correct, there should be plenty of money left over, the $243,000 anticipated cash in hand by the end of this year, to more than cover that, and hopefully the rest can go back to the city, and with negotiation perhaps redirect it to Parks and Recreation to specifically address some of the restoration and other issues to implement the master plan more quickly. Thank you.
Thank you for your comments. Just informationally, what we own is the conservation easement, and that's what we will turn over to another party to ensure that that conservation easement is enforced. So that's what we would be wanting to ensure was available in perpetuity to protect the things that we put the money into, so that it doesn't become something different than that. So it's, I don't know if that helps or not, but it's not just that you turn it over to the city and it goes away. It doesn't go away. That's a tangible thing that we own and that we will need to turn over to someone to protect going forward.
The city doesn't just renegotiate that with a new party once the district is dissolved?
No, we'll renegotiate that with the city before we dissolve. And the broad outline of that, I think the thing that Nicole said is, I think there's in large part agreement about what that should look like, and is quite different than what we have right now. And I think that may be a very straightforward process.
I think it's a good idea to have Watcom Land Trust involved. Certainly they're good trustees for preservation of the natural environment and the rest. And hopefully Bill Geyer's estimate of the cost is more true to what will be required than the very high figure that otherwise has been tossed around.
Yeah, it may well be possible if we do renegotiate that instrument to be in keeping with the broad outline that's in the initial efforts with the master planning process. I would think that may well be possible, but we don't know yet. I mean, I think that still is an open discussion that will need to happen over the next year.
Since the land trust already has an easement for the adjacent 16.5 acres, would that make it easier to develop an easement that more or less mirrors that, I think has been said at a previous meeting?
I think the desire is, in fact, to have those two in as much in alignment and agreement as we can. Yeah. It's of course a very different parcel of property. It's mostly a large wetland that was a beaver pond. I mean, it's a different parcel for sure. But I think that the desire, as I've heard it expressed by the commissioners over the last few months, is to have something as agreeable and coordinated and as close as it can be, while still protecting those things that are in the mission and objectives of our park district. Are there other people who would like to make public comment? I know there are a few other people here. John Blethyn, is you raising your hand?
John Hymas.
Well, John Blethyn was too, I think. John, why don't we hold off on the commissioners till the public has had a chance to speak, if that's okay? Yeah.
Cool.
John, Mr. Blethyn, were you holding up your hand to speak? Just unmute yourself and speak up.
Oh, I'm unmuted.
There you go.
First of all, this is well beyond my intellectual capacity, but be it may, it sounds to me like we need more discussion with Nicole about nuances. And it sounds like possibly we need Bob to talk to the city attorney. There's some questions that I have about how long you people are liable for what goes down here. Once the property transfers, does the board still have liability? And if it doesn't, then why are we doing a contingency for that? But again, I think that Nicole and the board needs really to bore down on the last of this. I totally support the land trust having a third party position in this process in perpetuity.
Thank you, John. Anyone else like to speak? Rita, I don't mean to pick on you, but if you want to speak, now's a good time. You can just unmute and feel free to speak up if you like. If you don't, that's fine too. I noticed you unmuted, Rita, so I'm hoping if you want to speak, we'll wait patiently for a minute if you're working on getting things ready to talk.
Hi there. Can you hear me?
Yeah, we hear you fine. Thank you.
I'm fairly new to the area and make use of the trails quite often, and I absolutely love it. I have a lot of passion for the area. So my intention of being here tonight is just to soak it all up and find out what's going on. So thank you.
Well, welcome, and come to any meeting you like. They're all public and we're more than happy to have you. And
thank you very much.
Thank you. So those are the only people that I've seen that are on the call other than the members of the board, the commission. And John, you wanted to say something? I guess we can come back to that now.
It would be, Chairman James, it would be appropriate then to close the public hearing and budget and open it up for discussion amongst the board.
Good idea. So I'll then close the meeting, everybody having had an opportunity to speak, and close the hearing. And then now it's up to the commissioners to have a discussion about this, and then we can vote on this particular issue. So John, you had something to say? John?
Sorry, I just wanted to remind everybody. We were sued and spent $100,000 of taxpayer money for that suit. And so I just like, I just wanted to bring that up, and I hope that nothing like that comes down again. We're almost to the home stretch here. So anyway, That's my comment.
Great. Do other commissioners have comments about this particular issue? So we're having a discussion about the public hearing on Budget Resolution 22 and Exhibit A.
There are
And we've
so many,
closed the public hearing, and it's a matter of the commissioners now discussing it, and then we'll can move forward with it.
it seems like there's a lot of unknowns. We don't have the plan done. We don't have, this parks doesn't even have the consultant figured out yet. We haven't discussed our consultant stuff. We have, we haven't even got the thing from this county on the election expenses even, but I mean, little things, but I prefer the larger budget, and you know, just because it's in the budget doesn't mean you have to spend it, but I prefer the larger budget, and we can come back next year and do all the things maybe that the two people that testified tonight wanted. But I'm prefer a conservative on this, and make sure we have enough in our coffers in case we need it. So that's my point.
So Commissioners McLaughlin and Brown, if you'd like to have additional comments, there's certainly plenty of time for it.
John Hymas has expressed his opinion. Hugh has expressed his opinion. We have a $0, $100,000, $136,000, $170,000 levy. I just don't know. I don't know. And Mr. Geyer's points came in, and Mr. Golden's points have come in the last hour. They came in an hour before the meeting. I'd very much like to be able to deliver to the public the information that they're not being taxed anymore. But that seems to be almost an irresponsible wish in view of the unknowns that we have talked about. So I am inclined to follow the lead of Mr. Hymas and go with the $100,000 levy, but I have to defer to I would defer to John McLaughlin and Frank, who are more informed about this than I am, and especially to the advice of our attorney. I wish our attorney would tell us what he would do.
I'm not going to do that.
Exactly.
He can't do that. Okay, I understand that, but I think that if we feel that the zero levy budget is exposing us, is going to put us in a difficult position, then I think it might be worthwhile for Mr. Carmichael to tell us that it might be put us in a difficult position. But maybe he doesn't want to say.
It's not really my place to make a policy decision like that. I think the board's capable of assessing the risks, same as me. If you have a specific question, though, I'd be happy to try to answer it.
Well, I can't formulate a specific question myself right now. I'm going to weigh in perhaps later, but I would like to hear what John McLaughlin and Frank James have to say. Frank, would you mind speaking first, if you want to?
Well, I'd be happy to. As I review these potential costs, I mean, responsible budgeting means you have enough money to do what you have to do. And what I think we should have is we need enough money to carry out the negotiation with the city about what the actual conservation easement is going to say when we're done with it. I think we've got a good progress on that, but it's not done, and we need enough money to carry out that negotiation. We also need enough support to have the negotiation with whoever the ultimate entity is going to be that defends that conservation easement in perpetuity. So we've got to have both of those things fully funded. Then I anticipate that as part of that, we're going to have a cost to defend the easement in perpetuity, and that'll be, back of the napkin, $50,000 to $200,000. I'm hoping that's closer to 50, but it might be more. And there may be other costs related to that as well. And then the last thing I think that's part of the cost that we should responsibly budget for is going to be enough money that if there is another request for public information, that we're able to fund that. I mean, I think that's the responsible thing to do. And I think, as I recall, it was something on the order of $10,000 last time. So I see those costs as real, substantial, and responsible to budget for. So I favor the higher number myself, the 170. I think that that's the responsible thing to do. I agree with you. And I think that if we do that, any residual that's there isn't going to disappear. It's going to go to the city, and we're going to negotiate hard to make sure that it goes toward helping to protect and develop this property in a responsible way. So that's my view.
Okay, that's very succinctly put, Frank. Can you tell me, or can anyone tell me, this $170,000 levy, what does that figure out to? We started out at a rate of 28 cents a thousand. What does this $170,000 levy, what kind of rate per thousand does it reflect?
Robin, do you remember what the precise number is? Or Bob, do you know what the number exactly? What I think it's a fraction of what our current rate is.
I believe it was 6 cents a thousand, but
Yeah,
it should be on the levy. We can look at that document.
yeah, I think it was 4 or 6 cents. It's a fraction, a small fraction of what the tax has been.
So in order to generate the $170,000 levy, we would be decreasing everyone's taxable amount on 1,000 by a factor of 7.
Something like that, yes.
So the exact number was 5.810,
Yeah.
5.8 cents per thousand at the 70,000 level. And Kirk just said it, 5.8 cents.
Yep, that's right. And so that means that that'd be about a 22 cents drop, a little more, a 22 cents per thousand decrease over what we currently do, from 28 to 5.8, roughly.
And that, in your opinion, Frank, it would seem obvious, let me put it very simply, that could and may very likely would seem likely to be the last time we would be levying anything.
Yeah, if there were no unforeseen costs, yes, I think that would be reasonable to expect.
I'm very much struck, Frank, by what Nicole said regarding this possible negotiation between Bob or between us and the city regarding the conservation easement, that Nicole anticipates. She's not pretending to be the authority on this, but she does anticipate that this is going to be very straightforward. That it's something that reasonable people could sit down and in a couple of hours of attorney's time, who knows? Mr. Carmichael and Mr. Mariner might get it done in a day and a half.
Yeah, I think.
Let me just say, I do agree with Nicole that it's straightforward. One of the difficulties, though, is we basically prepared the document that we wanted. I've prepared it and sent it over to the city and was trying to get some kind of agreement on it, but the city's position has been they don't want to negotiate it until the master plan is done. And so we weren't able to get certainty on what that cost would be. I would hope that it would be substantially less than $5,000 for which it's budgeted, but having an amendment to a document like the conservation easement could require a number of hours. I just don't know, and I thought we should be conservative about that, since we did not get reception from the city that yes, okay, we'll do this.
That's well put, Bob. I would hope that in this case, however this negotiation goes forward, that the city would, as they did with James King and Leslie Bryson, I expect that the city would listen to the educated and informed and on the grounds presence of a voice like Miss Oliver's. Miss Oliver is going to be advising and guiding the city in this.
Yeah, and I think the work of the steering committee, it has been entirely consistent with the request that we made. So if the steering committee continues on that path, I think we'll be in a very good place for that to be a swift and simple negotiation. Mr. McLaughlin, you have your hand raised. I'd love to hear from you.
Thank you. So I did some quick math, and our three options that we're looking at for $100,000, well, four options: a zero levy, $100,000 levy, $136,000 levy, and $170,000 levy. The $100,000 amounts to 4.0 cents per thousand. The 136 is 5.5 cents per thousand, and the 170 is the higher amount, is 6.8 cents per thousand. So that's just for clarification, for understanding the options we're looking at. Obviously,
Thank
zero
you very
would be
much,
zero.
John. Thank you.
I'd like to remind us, though, that this issue of defending the easement and all that sort of thing might be more involved than we've been considering. I hope we never, and I can't imagine we would ever have any kind of an expense like we had in defending the entire park district, where it was what, $109,000, $110,000, as John Hymas reminded us. But if you recall the violation of the easement that we notified the city about 5 years ago, almost to the day, with the construction of the rogue bike trail and bike jumps and erosion or digging into some of the surrounding hillside, that trail and the jumps are still out there. I went and I checked on Friday, and they're still there. Most of it is now covered with leaves, but when those leaves rot, disappear, blow away, it'll still be there, including the jumps themselves, which are still bare soil. And so I don't know the extent of the use there, particularly given the extensive bike trail development that others have noticed just to the south of that. But that impact is still there. And despite all of our attentions and all of the great cooperation and efforts on the part of the Parks Department, that impact and that violation of the conservation easement is still there. And so even with a really supportive and cooperative partner in the Parks Department, we still have the issue of defending the easement is a real one that we have to account for. Finally, the thing I did a quick calculation based on the numbers we have for the range of easement transfer fees that the land trust was giving us. And we can quibble all we want about whether it'd be more appropriate to be 50,000 or 200,000. But at this point, I think all we can go with is the numbers given us with the land trust. And that's the range they gave us. If we consider the additional cost of the consultant, of any contributions we have in the facilitation process, and then additional costs, including legal fees for negotiating conservation easement, anything associated with public documents, request costs, and that sort of thing. That all, in my quick estimation, comes out to about $275,000. And so given our current balance and our expected expenses to the end of the year, if that brings us down to a balance of around $170,000, $180,000, that would leave us with a need for an additional $100,000. And so that, I think, is an argument against a zero levy. but maybe not as high as the highest levy. But again, what we're dealing with is uncertainties of, you know, what is going to happen? What are the actual costs going to be? But that gives me a little bit more comfort in not, in perhaps going with a compromise and not going with the highest levy.
Thank you, John.
And also, I respond to Kirk's comment. I don't think we have any business dissolving until we have successfully transferred the easement and completed the master planning process. It is our profound obligation to ensure the stewardship and our responsibility to this place. It's why we spent $100,000+ in legal fees to defend the Park District. And so I would feel completely responsible in my position as a commissioner to even consider dissolving the Park District until that task, ensuring the protection of the place in perpetuity, is completed.
Thanks, John. John Hymas.
I'm not sure where the Honorable Commissioner John Brown came up with the idea that I was in favor of zero.
I'm
budget.
sorry if I misread you.
Yeah, so no, I agree with I agree with John McLaughlin, and I think that it's a conservative stance to go for the $170,000 budget for this next year. And so I just want to go on the record. If I think it's a safe way to go. Anyway, I had my.
Great, thank you, John. That's good to have that clarification. I think we're at a place where if there are more comments, we should make them, and then we should get towards voting. It is 7:20. We do have a fair amount more business to conduct. Are there additional comments, or should we vote on this? And Bob, should we vote on these one at a time, or should we vote on them at the end?
Well, first of all, yes, you need to vote on the
Yeah,
budget, and then you need to open up the public hearing on the levy, because this public hearing you just had was only on the budget.
Right.
Approve whatever levy you're going to approve if you approve one.
So is there more discussion about this item before us at this time? Do I hear a motion to adopt?
I move that we adopt the high end, the $170,000 levy for
I'll
20.
second that.
I hear a motion, a second. Is there further discussion of that?
Great. Point of clarification, we have two votes. One is for the levy amount and the other is for the budget.
This first vote is for the budget,
Yeah.
not for the levy.
This is the budget resolution. The levy will be dealt with next.
Oh,
So I thought the $170,000 is for the levy amount.
It is. So the budget will be the budget that is, I think it's the fourth option.
right.
So it's the options in Exhibit A. Is that right, Bob? And so we would,
The fourth option.
so the discussion, so what we're voting for would be in Exhibit A, the fourth option with respect to the budget resolution.
That's correct.
70, yeah. And then we'll have to deal with the levy next, which would be required to support that level of budget, if I'm correct. So, John, is that an adequate clarification, John Hymas, that we're talking about option 4?
Yes.
A, which would be the $170,000 of budget.
Right. It says $170,000 levy, but yeah, right. Yes.
Further discussion. I think we're at a point to call the question then. All those in favor, or is there a second to John Hymas's? Did I miss a second?
Hugh Beatty seconded.
Okay, John Hymas moved, Hugh Beatty seconded. All those in favor, please raise your right hand, say aye.
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 That's,
Aye.
that's unanimous. Let's move on to the next. I'd like to bring this hearing to, or the hearing's already closed. We just voted. I'd like to open the next hearing, which is on a public hearing on the tax levy resolution number 21, which you can find at the bottom of your email that you got from Robin, if you haven't looked at it.
This is the tax levy resolution number 21, correct? Please go. Yes, thank you.
So I'd like to open the hearing on it and hear what the public might have to say about it. Mr. Guyer, you have your hand raised.
Yes, Commissioner James, again, thank you, Bill Guyer, 1008 16th Street. Commissioner Brown and others have mentioned tonight, one of the key things that the ratepayers want to hear is that there is no more taxing going on. You all know that it was a very close vote by the people to establish this district, very close. We also know that it's been somewhat contentious. However, having said that, people have paid for this property to be preserved, and I'm going to still stand in support of my email to you for a zero levy for these reasons. I disagree with the earlier, someone made a statement that the levy must match the budget amount. No, that's incorrect. Again, look at your ending cash balance for 2021, which will be in excess of 240,000. You just adopted a budget, as I understand it, of 170,000. So you have more funds available in your pockets at the end of this year to perform in 2022. The other part of it that I would mention is, again, this discussion of Whatcom Land Trust has two factors that these requires very robust discussion. Number one, this is an easement that you are going to convey as a tax district to another entity. Now, I'm not an attorney. Mr. Carmichael will certainly remind you of that. But having been involved in several real estate transactions and as the prior director of planning for the city of Bellingham, I am aware that the transfer of property is required to occur under state law. And I do not believe that you can just simply transfer an easement which has value to some other entity without a very open and public process. That's point one. Point two, this estimate of this 50,000 to 200,000 goes to risk. And it's a matter of what do the commissioners see and what do us as taxpayers see as potential risk for perpetuity. I'm all in with the statements tonight about perpetual protection. I will plant the seed for just a couple ways of doing this, for either A, making a very slight change within the city charter to put this land on the same footing as Lake Padden, and I can explain that to you some other time, or B, putting the oversight and protection, because it does need to be protected, in the same venue as the Seaholm Arboretum has in its board and its standing through ordinance and code. I do not believe we need to go down the path of having a huge fire truck when all we need is someone that is a very good group of vigilant folks that are watching what's occurring and can take corrective action as needed. The city ultimately, Nicole and her staff will ultimately be responsible for seeing that the property is maintained properly. And I would very much like to see a separate discussion around the management of that, so we take away the fear of this $200,000 risk pool that's been thrown out here. We would much rather pay for improvements rather than attorneys and insurance pools, all due respect to Mr. Carmichael. But that is why I'm encouraging you to please adopt the zero levy. Thank you again for the time to comment, and should we have additional discussion in the future of these topics, I'm very open to doing that. Thank you.
Thanks, Bill. Appreciate your comments and appreciate your brevity as well. Kirk, you're next.
Well, once again, I agree completely with Bill Guyer. I obviously don't have the type of experience that he has, but I'm also a taxpayer, and I was a supporter of the ballot measure. I voted in favor. I do recognize, as he indicated, that it only passed by a small margin. It was somewhat controversial. I'm very glad it did pass. For a period of time over the last 8 years or so that the district has existed, I've actually owned 2 properties within the district, now just 1. So I think I've done my share. I'm a regular user of the trail several times a week, generally. And I do stand corrected. I think Bill Geyer was referring to me as far as the linkage between the zero levy and the $170,000 budget. But as stated, since we already have 200 or anticipate $243,000 cash on hand at the end of this calendar and fiscal year, that would be more than adequate to cover the 170,000 budget that has already been passed. So once again, I would support the resolution for a zero levy.
Thanks, Kirk. Anybody else that would like to comment from the public? I think I guess. Great. Well, I'd like to close the hearing and, excuse me, John Bleffin. I apologize. John, please open up and have a speech.
Yeah, I think next year is going to be a busy year for greenness. We've got a greenways levy and we've got an environmental levy that Seth has just proposed. And I kind of think that we have enough, I think you have enough reserve balance here. At some point, I'd love to see a third party. But my gut feeling is that parks can blunder along on this, and understanding the intent of what we're about. I think at some point we're going to have to trust parks to do the right thing. There's got to be some way to shortcut some of this expense. So I would recommend that you not run an additional levy. That the couple 100,000 that you have ought to be enough to close the process.
Thank you, John. I think that's the public that we have here. So if seeing no more interest in public comment, I'd like to close the hearing. And now, commissioners, I'd like to hear from you and in discussion about which of the options there. If you look through the email from Robin, you'll see that there are a number of resolution 21s with different amounts in them. They're labeled that way. So I think we have to decide which rate we would like to choose. All the rates are dramatically less than the current rate. So people will see a very sharp drop in the amount that they're taxed in this, what will probably be the final year of taxation. And I'd love to hear discussion about the options that people see there.
Okay, I'm looking at the third one, the second one, the first one. So there are 4 different resolutions, four of them, each one of which specifies a different amount. Am I reading this correctly?
That's correct, yeah.
And we are leaning, so far as we have approved a budget of 170,000. Be sure to correct me if I'm wrong. 170,000. We are leaning in the direction of the 4th resolution of taxing. What is it? I'm not sure I have that page.
So I think, to be specific, it'd be the $170,000 amount, and that's 5.8 cents per thousand.
Right.
That's, yeah. There are, of course, assumptions in that. The assumptions are laid out in the specific draft of Resolution 21.
So can I speak?
Of course, yeah, that's what we're doing now. Yep.
So, I know that we kind of discussed this in the past, but if we end up when the dust settles with extra money, where does that go? Does that go to the city general fund or park and district endowment, or where?
So my understanding is that the civics of it in the current law is that it goes to the general fund of the city. And
Okay,
what we have hoped, and I think there's some reason to believe it might be possible, be to negotiate with the city about where that goes.
cool.
There's some good faith on their part about this was raised for this parcel of land, and we would request that they utilize that money for the development of that land. It turns out that some of these things like over wetland trails are very expensive. The
Right.
thing that Nicole alluded to, it's almost $1,000 a foot if you include all the
I
regular
know.
costs, which
Right.
are pretty substantial.
Yeah.
There
thanks
might
for-
be a way of making that somewhat more possible to have over wetland elevated trails, but they
Mhm.
are very expensive, and that
Right.
might be something we could ask, for example. But we could ask,
That'd be cool.
we could ask for anything, and the city could give us everything or nothing.
Right. Yep.
And Bob, correct me if I'm wrong, but I believe that's the case.
Yeah, that's what it seemed like, as I recall. So anyway, I think we go for the 170 and just to cover our asses, you know?
Is that a motion? Or is there more discussion?
That 5.8 cents will generate $170,000.
That's correct. Yeah.
Approximately.
Approximately. Okay. Mr. Geyer and Mr. Gilden have both referred to the cash on hand. I feel that just in good conscience that I have to address this point. That our unencumbered cash at the end of the year is around $482,000. Correct me if I'm wrong, but from what I'm saying in a simple way is that we have $482,000 and we're asking for another $170,000. I understand that that's a good way of putting it, but help me out.
John, I thought it was 243, but you know, not
Yeah, 243,000.
yeah, in round numbers, yeah,
Okay, 243
yeah.
plus 170 is $410,000. Are we talking about $410,000 that we have? Okay, we have that money. We are going to have expenses like salaries, like paper costs, copy costs, our attorney's costs along the way. I understand that these things have been laid out in the budget. Can we justify? Can each one of us justify having unencumbered cash of $410,000?
Well, the things that have been mentioned that would be covered by that would be the full cost of a legal defense fund for the conservation unit in perpetuity. That's
Right.
the bulk of it probably. There's also the cost of negotiating with the city for having a final conservation easement. There's also the negotiation costs for working with whoever. The land trust may not want this easement. I mean, we have to make sure that they do. And if not, we'll need to find somebody else that will hold this easement in perpetuity. So there are going to be negotiation costs around that. In addition, there's all of our usual costs of the work that Robin does and the other expenses that we have. So I believe it's a responsible amount of money. I believe that if there is excess money, we can direct it to supporting the reason these taxes were levied in the first place. So I personally, John, believe that that there are definite costs that we need to bear. And I honestly think it would be irresponsible not to have an adequate amount of money during the year. And that it's a reasonable to be certain that we can then at least request that the city direct these funding to any additional work within the park district going forward. So I see it as a responsible amount of money. We may also have expenses going into the following year. I know some people are quite anxious for the park district to go away. We may not be done with the negotiations with respect to the conservation easement or finding a holder for the conservation easement. We may well have expenses into the next year.
Into 2023.
We simply don't know that at this point. We don't know how successful we'll be in getting the city to renegotiate the conservation easement. We don't yet know who for sure is going to hold that conservation easement or what costs might be attendant to having them hold that conservation easement.
That said, Frank, I am inclined myself, insofar as there is a motion to go with $170,000, but I am feeling that Mr. Geyer and Mr. Golden, and they speak for a good many, I have a feeling that they have put their points, and so has Mr. Blethen, that these are very responsible voices and challenging voices, and I hope they appreciate how hard a decision this is for us. We are faced with unknowns, and we just don't know how a lot of this is going to play out. So if there is a motion to enact, has the motion been put forth to?
There isn't a motion, John. It was
or is it still discussed?
Suggested, but there is not a formal motion nor a second yet.
Two things I'd like to point out. One is Mr. McLaughlin has his hand up. And another one is that we have a number of comments in the chat boxes from Mr. Geyer, Mr. Gilden, and Nicole Oliver. You might want to take a look and at least acknowledge those or address those.
They're duly noted, but I honestly think chat boxes and public process are very adequate because not everyone can see them. So I think that there are things that we should not do in the future. And just from a process point of view, it's fine for everybody who's got a computer. Anybody on the phone or anybody that doesn't have the ability to do this, I think it's not something I believe, unless we read them all, is appropriate for a way to communicate. But be that as it may, we certainly can all read it, and we can read them to the public, but anybody that might not have access to it.
I'm reading them right now. Yeah, I don't know what to say.
Well, there's a fair number of comments. I can summarize them, I think, fairly quickly and fairly. There's a discussion that the $170,000 is 5.8 cents per thousand, which I think is accurate by Mr. Geyer, and Kirk agreed with that. There was a request to dissolve the district at the end of 2022 by Kirk, and some discussion about who had the authority to do that. And I think we're clear about that at this point. And Nicole added another comment that the mayor is announcing a climate action fund levy and the greenways levy that the city is going to be putting forward in 2023. And then Bill Geyer went on to say that the ratepayers need to craft their position prior to negotiations with the city, irrespective of the mayor's proposals or other levies. Thank you, Bill, for that comment. And then he disagrees. The key point is the nexus of the funds, who paid, to the expenditure that benefits the ratepayers. The citizens would disagree with dumping the money into the general fund. I thank you for the comment, and I agree, and we will do all we can to make that happen. And then Kirk wanted us to please respond to public input, which we get lots of public input, both in the meetings and outside of them, and we will be happy to. And then Bill, add the Commissioner James is correct, hence the need to open the public hearing for longer presentation of testimony. Thank you. So And then those are the comments that are in there. And I hope they're fair and accurate. Again, I think that may not be the best way to do things. We'll open the public comments again before we're done with the meeting.
Do you want a motion right now, Frank? Is that
I think the next thing is, I believe, John McLaughlin, did you have an opportunity to speak? And I believe you had your hand up, and I'd like to recognize John and patient usual. John.
Yeah, thank you. I would like to speak before we entertain motions. I guess three things. First, the discussion about funding wetland crossings and that sort of thing would move the park district into a different realm. Formerly, the city, which is the owner of the land, has done that sort of maintenance and development work in the past. And so it might be worth doing if it expedites a solution that otherwise would be delayed and incur further environmental impact in a delay. But if we're going to do that, we should do it with intention. And I think that's probably.
I think if it was what I said, my intent was to offer that as something to the city that they could do with the residual funds. I wasn't thinking we would do that. So I think, if that was your understanding, that wasn't what I intended.
Great. So it's entirely reserved to the scenario in which we do have funds left over at the end.
Right.
Okay.
And just
second,
request the city consider doing that with the money. Yeah.
Second point, I think Nicole's comments about additional levies being proposed is a good one. That is for the larger good of the city, beyond the park district itself. And perhaps, we're reducing all of our scenarios, as you described, Frank, are going to reduce the Chuckanut Community Park District levy substantially. And so I think our decision should be made in the context of these additional needs for funding beyond the park district, although park district members would be paying those same things. So any financial wiggle room we can provide, I think, would be helpful. Then the third thing is
although John, just for a point of clarity, is that I think those are for 2023, and our levy would have expired in 2023. And I haven't heard anybody propose that we're going to have a levy in 2023. So I think that's sort of, it's a good point, but a moot one, because I don't think that's proposed. Yeah,
that's true. It is in the general concern of property taxes and the burden that does place on people. I would remind us, though, that as much as the park district has been charging, the estimate of what would have happened without the park district was greater. So the increase in as we've seen public subsidies to development on that place would have cost more than purchasing Chuckanut Community Forest. And so
good point.
Whatever we're doing, we actually have saved taxpayers money, and we've protected a jewel in the process. But again,
the estimate was actually $13 million in public subsidy for the development project. Yeah.
Yep. Wow. But that's essentially water under the bridge. We've already gone there. We've done that, and the question is, what do we do in the next year? And so there, if we look again at the anticipated expenses, again we don't have clarity from the land trust, and we don't even have clarity if it was a matter of the easement, what's going to happen with that, although we have some very good faith partners in that. I think we need to cover the higher contingency of $200,000 with the additional expenses that we consider. But it sure looks to me like if we have a balance after this year of 170, then we could cover the anticipated expenses, even with the upper limit with the land trust, with $100,000 levy. And I need a little more convincing to understand why we would need the higher amount of $170,000. I guess I'm not understanding where that additional $70,000 is needed.
I don't think there is an identified place where it's needed, John. I think that's is a fund that would allow us to deal with unanticipated costs, is my understanding. I wasn't involved in developing those options, but that would be my estimate.
It is unanticipated, but I think on the other side, we also have the anticipated concern of people continuing to pay money beyond what they think is needed. And so it's a balance between the risk associated with unanticipated costs and what those might be versus the certainty of alienating some fraction of the Park District residents, and then the implications for future levies. So I guess what I'm trying to think is, if we're trying to strike a balance, where does the appropriate balance lie? And I'm still not seeing a strong justification for an extra $70,000. I think the going with a zero levy, as compelling the arguments are, I think that would leave us with too much exposure. And I think we would reasonably anticipate falling short. But I don't see where we would need the full $170,000. And I'm seeing, again, about $100,000, maybe a little bit more if we're really convinced there are additional uncertainties we're not factoring in.
John, then that would be the 3.4 cents per thousand, again, a 25 cent per thousand reduction, roughly 24.5 cent reduction.
My calculations are 4 cents per thousand, but
yeah,
okay.
I think it's 3.4, but it's at any rate, all of them are estimates. Keep that in mind, that these are based on estimates. But so the choice is just to try to crisp it up for the commissioners. There's a 100,000, 136, 170, and 0. It seems like I haven't heard advocacy for the 0. I have heard some advocacy for the 170, and now you're proposing a midpoint, either 100 or 136. So, though, is that fair, John? To summarize?
Yes, that is quite fair.
And then,
well, to clarify, we have heard advocacy from the public for 0.
Right.
Right. Yeah, I meant in our discussion.
Right.
So Hugh, did you have your hand up and take it down?
Yes, I did. I was going to say that where I live in Happy Valley, if somebody said to me or that your taxes on your levy was going to go down from 28 cents per thousand to this, whatever it was, 5.8 per thousand, we'd say, hooray, that's great. So I mean, everybody's homes have gone up so much in value in this 12 and a half precincts that make up this district. It's a tiny amount now. And I also want to correct the record here a little bit. Where I live, we passed this thing over 2 to 1. Okay, it wasn't close in my neighborhood. And it didn't pass in some of the wealthier neighborhoods. It was five neighborhoods. 5 neighborhoods that didn't pass.
Okay. Anybody else have comments? We do.
Favored the higher levy. So
yeah, it's almost
28. I'd keep it at 28 even for the 10 years. I would, because that's what we voted on to begin with.
So just to note that we're almost at 8 o'clock now. So I would love to hear a motion by someone for a proposal of the.
I would like to make a motion.
36 or the 170 or the 0.
I would like to make a motion for the 136. with appreciating John McLaughlin's points and also appreciating John Hymas's and Hughes and Frank's. We all kind of know where we are on this. I'll just, to get the ball rolling, I'd like to make a motion that we pass the levy amount of 4.6, which generates $136,000 in levy.
I'll second that.
Okay, a motion and a second, a discussion? Hearing none, I'll call the question. All those in favor of that, please say aye or raise your right hand.
Aye.
Aye. The motion passes of 136. We've got that done, right?
Yep.
I think we do. All right, we still have a lot of other work to do still tonight. I'll like to, do we close both those public hearings? We're now moving on to the audit issue. The next audit is expected to be towards the end of 2022, and if we go longer.
The vote there. What was the vote?
All those people raise their right hand, or go ahead, raise your right hand. Let's look at you. Okay. I think that's everybody, Hugh. Did you vote for it or against it? I can't hear
Hugh,
you.
you're muted.
I think it was 4-1 was the vote.
Yeah,
That's
it was
correct.
4, and did you abstain or vote against? I'm sorry, Hugh, I didn't clarify that.
I didn't hear anybody say who wanted to vote against it. I would have.
Okay, I'm sorry, Hugh. It's an error on my part. And did you want to register an abstention or a nay vote?
I'll vote nay.
Okay.
I made my position clear that I think.
Yeah, let the record show that we had 4 in favor and 1 against. And thank you, Hugh. I appreciate the clarification. Sorry that I went past you. It's hard to keep all the people on the screen at one time.
Yeah.
All right. The next issue is about the requiring an audit. If the park district goes longer, there may be another audit at the end. And Robin, could you please explain this issue and say what it is? Is there a decision we need to make, or is this for information?
That was just for information pertaining to you guys passing the budget and the tax levy. So it's not an additional item. It was just information that we might have another audit, but it may be that if we're looking to be done at the end of 2022, that they will just wait and do it all at once. So, or if they do it, it might only be another year, which should be much less in cost than 3 years. So I just had not actually looked up the actual dates at our last meeting. So I just wanted people to know that.
Thanks, Robin. That's very useful information. We appreciate it. Moving on, now that the public hearings are done, I'd like to have a motion to approve our minutes. And if you can look back over those minutes and ask if there are any additions, corrections, deletions, please take a quick minute to look at that. Or if you've already looked at it, could you bring forward any concerns you may have at this time?
I read the minutes and I thought that they were superb as usual, just unusually informative and educational. And I was especially struck by the fact how cordially this last meeting went, and that Miss Oliver pointed out that 2 years ago she suggested that we hire a consultant, and kudos to her for that. Okay, that's all I have. I think they look fine. I'd like to make a motion that we accept the minutes that Robin has submitted.
Do they have a chance to look at them?
I'll second that. I read through them. I agree with John Brown. Way to
agree.
go, Robin. You're awesome.
I was going to say that same thing, John. Robin, I think we all think you're awesome. Thank you very much for your leadership and your dedication and the deep attention to detail. It's very, very valuable.
Thank
We
you.
have a-
Sorry for the delay in them.
No worries. We'd favor quality over quickness any day. So we have a motion, a second. Is there further discussion on accepting the minutes as written? I'll call the question. All those in favor, please say aye. Raise your right hand. There we go.
Aye.
All right.
There we go. That passes unanimously. Old business, we have a little bit of old business here that's pretty important. We're looking at the RFP submittals. I trust that everybody had a chance to look at them. We have two, I think, very strong contributions. Again, our concern is that we have adequate representatives of the issues of conservation, restoration, and preservation of the property. I'd love to open it up for discussion of the commissioners. I know people, I hope you've each had a chance to look them over, and I'd appreciate to open up discussion about this.
I'll start. I sat down and read through both of them, and they're just, I know, some of the people on both sides, and they're both excellent. Personally, I lean a hair towards the lazy puppy or what?
Tired
Tired
pups.
pups.
Tired pup. Yeah. Greg Wilcox. Yeah. Personally, anyway, that's where I stand at this moment.
Other commentary, questions or discussion?
Can I ask a question? When were those packages sent out? Because I don't think I've received them.
They didn't get sent out, John. I called you a bunch of times trying to
Right.
deliver it to your house, and I
Yep.
didn't get a response, so I'm sorry we don't have one, because we only have hard copies, and I have one of each. Waiting.
Understand.
Yeah. So we can.
Sorry, I've been so hard to find. Like you, I'm a frontline worker dealing with the pandemic.
I thought you were out of the country or in the woods, but I can summarize some of the things. So there are two proposals. The first one, as said, is from Tired Pups Consulting. And that's really two people. That's Ken Wilcox, who I think most of us know, and Bud Hardwick, who's an associate planner with the effort. Their proposal is mainly focused on trail design. And they've got a work plan that is includes kind of a kickoff discussion, then a maps and data collection, and then a field reconnaissance, and then looking at the existing trails and conditions, and then and a process to go with that, and then some follow-up after that, and then a progress meeting with us, and then a preliminary plan development and a field visit with us. And then they plan on having a formal consultation process with the city to ensure coordination there, and then revise the plan one more time, and then a stewardship program framework looking at a kind of a long-term plan with those values as we discussed. And they did want the whole amount of money. They thought it would take that. They both have extensive experience in trail construction and broader than just trail construction in a fair amount of planning. Tim's been involved in the Chuckanut Mountain Trail Master Plan. He's also been involved in the City of Blaine, citywide trails and open space plan, the Island and Skagit County's regional non-motorized trail plan, the Whatcom Land Trust Chuckanut Mountain Conservation Plan, and in Mason County, the Mason County Regional Trails Plan and the Spigot Trail project there. The other proposal is from Herrera, which is the main local person there is Chris Webb, and as John Hyman said, people most of us know quite well. Chris was involved in the volunteer effort in designing and building that connector just north of the 100 Acre Wood. It's a different kind of proposal. It's involved a team of people, both Chris as an engineer, and then a landscape architect, an ecological design person, and then a civil engineer and a natural resource and ecology specialist are the team that he put together. Both teams have communicated with Ann Isinger, and Ann Isinger, although she didn't put in a proposal, I'd hoped very much that she would. She's agreed to help both of these teams with their efforts to particularly on the larger environmental impact issues that Ann has spoken passionately with us about in the past. With the proposal from Chris Webb, there'd be a background and data review project and a base map project as an initial step. The second task would be putting that data then onto the site and looking carefully at that. And then an ecological analysis to see how the actual ecology might support one element of that plan over another with a focus on conservation and restoration. And then a specific trail system analysis, and then a master plan development to augment what the city is doing. And I think that's a fair summary of what they've done. And most of you, except for John McLaughlin, I think have had time to look at this carefully. Chris's team has extensive work. One of the things I liked about it is they work with the city a fair amount, so they know how the city works and how we can best integrate with the city. I think it's going to be very important that what we do augment, supplement, and support the city's effort. We obviously have believed and continue to believe that more resources necessary to do an adequate job of developing a master plan, and that additional resources would be money well spent. The projects that they've done are the Cordata Community Park and Trails, the Bellingham Airport Trails Planning and Design, the Cordata Trail and to Elementary School in Bellingham, the shared trails down in Pierce County, the Duwamish Critical Areas and Feasibility Study in the Seattle area, the Chambers Lake Stormwater Park and Trails in Lacey. And so they have deep and significant experience in doing those things. So I think we have two very good proposals. And I think that either one would add considerably to what is currently planned by the city, by people that both these groups have worked extensively in our region and are in detail familiar with the city's planning process and design process. That's just a summary, John, for you. I'm sorry I didn't
Thank you.
Copies to you. Yeah. Yes, Robin.
I just wanted to mention to John McLaughlin that Bob Carmichael emailed you a copy of the proposals.
Did?
Yes.
Oh, how I missed that.
Now.
I just did now when I heard you didn't have it, John.
Okay.
If I had known, I would have sent it to you.
All right.
All right.
Thank you.
I would have sent it to you too, but I didn't have an electronic copy because we didn't ask him to submit it that way.
We just scanned it in here.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I would like to make a motion. It's premature, but maybe it's on point. That a motion to accept the proposal from Herrera. My reasoning, I would like to make a motion to accept their proposal. And my reasoning for that is that their resources are just deeper. We all know Mr. Wilcox and his involvement with the property, his involvement in town, and both these we would have difficulty speaking more highly of him. We all respect him and like him. Mr. Herrera's proposal, or this proposal from Mr.
Webb.
Mr. Webb, I make a motion that we accept that.
Is there a second to that motion? You had a chance to look at it, John?
I'm not going to be able to have,
Yeah,
this is going to take more time than we have right now.
yeah.
One thing I from what your summary, what you suggested, is that from the projects you described, except for perhaps the bridge working with Recreation Northwest, most of the projects you described are a little different than the Chuckanut Community Forest, whereas many of the projects that Tired Pups Consulting has done is more similar to Chuckanut Community Forest. That said, I really need to look more closely at the details to see how well each proposal aligns with our needs, because it sounds like the background, the expertise, and even what they're proposing is a little bit different. So again, I really don't have an informed opinion, or really a fair opinion. I'm very familiar with Ken Wilcox, have a lot of respect for him, but I don't think I can give a fair comparison with Herrera.
I support what John Brown proposes in that I think that they do definitely have more depth and breadth, and I think that Ken's proposal was a little too strong on trails, because I think it's really bigger than the trails. We need to look at the entire ecology of the property and have a master plan that incorporates that. A good deal of the restoration has nothing to do with trails. And I think we really need a deep understanding of how the hydrology works and how the things that we do, all the things we do, will impact that. And I think an effort, and one of the things I was really glad to hear Nicole mention tonight is that I really think the two big issues in terms of public process are going to be bikes and dogs. And I think those are things that I'm really glad the city's taking on, leaving us more free to fund understanding the fundamental hydrology and the biology of the place, not just the trails and their use. So I actually agree with John that I think the project from Chris Webb and his associates is more robust and more in keeping with the mandate that we made, which is we've got to augment what the city would do with conservation, restoration, and preservation priorities. And so I personally favor that proposal. Although I worked hard to get Ken to make a proposal. I feel, I'm really glad that he did. I'm only disappointed that Ann Eisinger wasn't able to. And I don't think it's that she doesn't want to. I think she really, her current situation does not allow her to participate as a full member. And I think she will help whoever gets it significantly, that she's very committed to this parcel of property and to the community forest and to the park district. She's demonstrated that many times.
Mentioned in both proposals, so that's good.
What?
I said she is mentioned in both of the proposals.
Oh, right. Yeah.
Favorably. So.
Yeah.
I think they reached out to her and she reached out to them to ensure that was a possibility. Personally,
I still favor the Ken Wilcox Tired Pups. I know some people mentioned in both reports, and I don't know. I think that I think Ken, with his background and knowledge of the forest, and his friend Bud, and Eisinger, I think, I don't know. I favor them over a 100-person company that's spread out over the Northwest. I don't know. I prefer Ken.
Those are very good reasons, John. Those are good reasons. I'm listening closely to what you're saying.
Yeah. Anyway, that's where I'm at.
Well, I consider Ken a friend, but Chris Webb is not Seattle guy. I mean, he's lived here and worked here for a long, long time. And,
Sure.
and has really demonstrated a strong commitment to our community and actually this property. I mean, he's volunteered his time extensively already.
Right.
So
Yeah.
I think they're two good proposals, but I do think that they've got more technical expertise. And I think what we need here is that hydrological and that ecological expertise to really protect. If we're just trails, the city's they've got a pretty well-developed and robust plan already. I think they've got that moving, and the work that John did with his students has really put us in pretty good shape in terms of knowing what the alternatives are there.
Right.
And it's really, how are we going to be able to get out into the wetlands, and how can we keep people from messing it up and yet also give them the opportunity to see it? In addition to, how do we actually restore the hydrology? That big ditch that goes down the middle of things is still a scar on the land, and it needs to be restored.
Yeah. Well, I know Tina from years ago when she was on the board at NC, and she's a wetland expert and wonderful person. So, I'm kind of torn, but I don't know. I just think that, I don't know. I think Ken is more, and it's not like it's all about trails with Wilcox. It's, there's more to it than that. And he knows that because he's looked at our RFP. So anyway, I just thought I'd throw in my 5 cents worth. I don't know. The thing is, we have to do this pretty swiftly.
Right now.
Yeah. So
I tend to favor the tired pups. I've known Ken for a very long time. I really respect him as a writer. I think he's a very good writer.
yeah.
And I'm aware of all his activities over the years. And I think he could get right on it, and them could really move on it quick, and we have to move quick, because the city took forever to get going on it.
I'd like to withdraw my motion. I'd like to make a motion that we accept hired pups.
Well, I'll second that.
So it's moved and seconded. Now we'll open it for further discussion. I mean, I really like Ken, but I just have to say that I do think there's a much more robust technical capacity to augment what the city's going to do in the other proposal. And I think that's what we're looking at, is the marginal difference between what the city's going to do and what we can add to it. And I think the city's going to do a lot of what was in Ken's proposal.
Well, that's interesting information. That's a good point, Frank.
I think we're going to need the depth of hydrology and the depth of ecology to really have we're going to have to be quick, and we're going to have to be really clear about what the priorities are. And at least I have confidence that Chris Webb and their team can do that. Nothing bad about Ken at all. I mean, he's a wonderful guy, and I'm glad I tried to talk him into doing this. I was working on it positively. Certainly not against Ken.
I want to make
Bob,
a point
you have
just about
process
the,
issue?
about the process. The selections made, we will need to try to get a contract in place as soon as possible, which means I would want to be in touch with whoever is chosen, and we will try to work out a scope of work consistent with what we've been talking about in the RFQ. I am assuming these are just RFQs and these consultants will be flexible, but given the time frame that I heard from Nicole Oliver earlier, we're going to need to move faster for Ken Wilcox, for example, than what he's proposed. He has tasks 1 through 10, and task 10 would be deliverable in 180 days or less. We're going to need to move more quickly than that. He does have task 1 through 4 at 60 days, and then 5 through 7 at 90 days, and then 9 in 120 days. If the city is planning to wrap this up by the first quarter, we're going to have to move quickly, is all I'm saying.
It's a good pragmatic clarification. Thank you.
Do we think it's reasonable for the city to wrap this up by the first quarter?
I mean, I know that that's Nicole and her team's intention, very clear and strong preference, but hopefully the steering committee actually will steer and can provide feedback about that. And that feedback will be heard. So I think it's an extraordinarily aggressive posture. I know they're planning on it. I know they have a plan for it. But I do think we need to push back some on that too. I mean, we need a quality product. We don't need something. I don't know why the rush. I mean, it's been years and nothing's happened. And now suddenly we're going to do it in a few months. That doesn't sit well with me, honestly. It doesn't seem reasonable. And I don't see the reason not to take, it may not be 180 days, but I think certainly there's an opportunity to take more time than is currently offered.
Does Mr. Herrera, or excuse me, I keep referring, does Mr. Webb give us a time frame?
No,
No, he does not.
If
No.
he could give us a time frame that coincided more with what the city is proposing, and if he could do this work more quickly.
I know that he is aware of the city's plan and is prepared to do a process in coordination with the city and cooperate.
You know that he knows of the city's plan.
Yes.
Well, then I support him. I would support a motion for him.
Well, we already have a motion. We have one motion on the table. We can't take
Well, I'm
another.
going to give another one. Okay, go ahead.
We
I
have a
think
second.
seriously that Dr. McLaughlin would weigh in on your side, Frank, from what he has heard. We can ignore him because he's not informed. He doesn't have materials. But we know that he's a distinguished scientist, and I think that he would tend to side with what you're saying. And given the time frame that Bob has pointed out, I know Ken Wilcox too, and we all like him very much. I would like to make a motion, a serious motion, that we go with Herrera.
Right now we have on the floor a motion and a second to go with Tired Cups. So you have to withdraw your motion, but whoever seconded your motion would have to withdraw that as well.
well, I seconded it and I'm not going to withdraw it.
We're going to arrest you.
Well, then I think we should vote on the motion for Tired Cups.
Who made the motion then? Was that was John Brown's motion?
That was John Brown, seconded by John.
John.
That motion is on the floor right now. And if John Hymas is not willing to withdraw his second, then I believe that motion needs to be voted on.
And John can't go back to the original motion that he made? Is that the way
No,
the process
he
works?
withdrew it. I don't think that one had been seconded, as I recall.
It wasn't, no.
But the second time he did it, it was quickly seconded by John Hymas. So we do need to have a vote on it.
Sure. Is there more discussion about the Tired Pups?
Sure, I'll throw something in. Having quickly scanned both proposals during this discussion, I do see an emphasis on trail systems, trails, trail restoration, all that sort of stuff in the Tired Pups. There's a more comprehensive discussion, more comprehensive scope described in Herrera proposal, although I'm not seeing the details that I think we've been advocating for regarding restoring hydrology, particularly the hydrologic connections between wetlands, both surface and subsurface. Obviously the ditch, and then I guess restoring beavers or installing beaver dam analogs is really outside of our scope, because that would really be in the wetland with the city owns with the land trust easement. But there are a number of issues beyond trails that I think we all agree are important, and I'm really not seeing the details of that in the Herrera proposal. I'm not seeing it in the Tired Pups proposal.
That's
either.
not what we asked for. So we did a request for qualifications. So what they were supposed to provide with us was their experience and their ability to do the scope of work that we briefly outlined.
Right,
So
that's what I was going to get to next is
we need to go back and then have a deliverables discussion with them, given their qualifications.
So our decision then is really based on the experience and the qualifications of these people, as opposed to the details they put in and what they would do.
Right. And there is in part D and E and F at the last 2 pages of the Herrera proposal, there's quite a bit of information about the beyond trail planning, where there's the ecological and restoration practices and civil engineering and stormwater, and the fact that they can bring all those technical expertise under one roof is one of the things that they emphasize in their qualifications. And one of the reasons that I looked at it favorably. Is there further discussion? All right, well,
It would be nice if we could pick a few from each one, but
What you?
I said, it would be nice if we could take Tina and Chris plus
Right.
Tired Pups and come up with something better even. But I guess
further-
I'll go with whoever you guys want, I'll just.
Okay, so the way this is structured, we have to vote on Tired Pups, and a vote for them is for them, and a vote against them will bring us back to the other group. So all those in favor of Tired Pups, raise your right hand.
Aye.
Okay, the motion, well, those abstaining? Those against? 2 abstentions? Against? 2 against? So the motion fails. Do I hear another motion? We are clearly divided.
Go ahead,
Claire,
Brown.
I don't want to keep talking. I will make a motion that we accept Herrera.
Do I hear a second? I mean, can I second it, Bob, to get a
Why
vote?
can't the chairman make a second?
Ah, shit, I'll second.
Okay, moved and seconded. All those in favor signify by raising your right hand and saying aye.
Yeah, boy.
Aye, okay. And John, I assume you're abstaining?
Yep. You got it.
So 4 with 1 abstention. We still have a lot of work to do, and it is 8:30. So let's, so the monthly expenses and cash flow, or just a second. We got some other reports. The Parks Committee, did you, John, or John or John Blethyn, do you have a report from the Parks Committee?
I'm hoping John Blethyn is still on.
He is. His name's up there. John, are you still there? Mr.
I'm
Blethyn?
still here.
Any discussion of the Parks?
We had a park board meeting this morning, and I did announce that we were nearly through the acquisition portion with this organization. So we got a good hurrah on that. And I indicated that there may be a levy amount in a carryover of a small amount. So I guess I was prescient. I did get a look from Nicole, and I can certainly understand why. So that's what I have to report. Looking
Thank you.
forward to Friday.
Thank you, John.
And Nicole, could you share the data sharing agreement issue with the auditor's office? How are we doing there?
That's with Bob Carm.
Oh, Bob, I'm sorry. No. Bob, the data sharing agreement with the auditor?
My recommendation is that we just go ahead and say okay to that data sharing agreement. If you were to vote, I don't know if do they have it as part of the packet, Robin?
It is in our packet. Yeah, it's old business item number 2.
And that was the one that was the latest one I sent to you, I think.
Yes, I did not send it out again. I'm sorry. I should have done that.
The items on the agenda, the document was not sent out. Did you send it last time, Robin?
I made a change or two I made a couple changes to it when I sent it to you, Robin, because that was the updated one. Is that the one that's attached?
No, she said she
No,
didn't.
I didn't attach it. I forgot to attach it to the meeting. I guess because I felt like you had an informational email that what you sent out was sort of the package, and I should have clarified
That's
that.
okay. That's okay. So, well, let's not vote on it tonight, but my recommendation to the board is that they sign authorized signature on the document. Technically, I think the state auditor is asking you to do something more than what they should because they haven't agreed to an indemnification provision. But I don't think it's worth spending any more of my time on it with them, frankly. They did agree to a couple of the changes that I requested. And so I would recommend you authorize signature once you have the document in front of you. And the auditor is still collecting signatures. We have a meeting in 2 weeks. We can put the updated version on the agenda for next time and vote on it.
Okay.
Let's move that forward then. That sounds perfect. Thank you, Bob. And reporting steering committee meeting on the master planning updates. I guess I can take a little bit of that if anybody else wants some of it. There were several of us there. The master planning process is being very well facilitated by the facilitator the city has hired. We did look at a draft plan. We have an agenda and a timeline that's moving forward. Bob or John, let's see, I think, Hugh, were you there? I know that John Brown was there, and I thought that you were there too in the background. Weren't you, Hugh?
I was there.
Any additional comments or insights?
Well, I made my point about the dogs. And I don't have the minutes in front of me at the moment, but you can check the minutes if you want. I just, I went further and also noticed that it's only a $25 fine for running the dog without a leash. And so basically, if you're coming over from Viewcrest to run your dog, you got to pay a $25 fine. Who cares? You know?
I don't know. That seems pretty reasonable.
Talking, you're talking a 100 acre place with maybe 30 animal or 70 dog, about a 1.2 dogs per acre in that place at any time when we were doing our survey there. So what will the foxes do and the little weasels and the little stuff? I don't know. It's just, I don't think we're ever going to get wildlife going in there very much. And even amphibians are a hazard from
Good
bikes
point.
and dogs,
I think those are issues that I think dogs and bikes are going to be the big issues the city's going to take on in a public process, and people that care about those things are going to have to be involved in that process to make an impact on it. So I hope we can encourage people that have opinions about those to be involved.
I agree. May I say also that you said, Frank, Nicole has said, I think that Hugh would agree that the last meeting of the steering committee was very productive, at least, and Vince, that we all are forward. We're hopeful. We're full of energy, and we're going to meet on Friday. So upbeat. I'm upbeat about it. Yeah.
We could talk about signage maybe too, Friday.
Yeah,
Or, and maybe stocks.
Yeah.
Okay.
great. And then the urban forestry plan letter, John McLaughlin.
So we'll respond to that, but before we do, regardless of how the dog issue gets resolved, restoring shrubs and herbaceous vegetation in much higher density will help mitigate whatever dog activities in there. Because right now it's really open, and the foxes and whatever wildlife are there are pretty exposed. I'll handle the urban forestry plan letter quickly. There were over 20 email messages since our last meeting. I haven't got to it yet, and that doesn't even include looking at the RFQs. So
So the urban forestry plan letter is coming.
by next meeting, yes.
Okay, great. Thank you.
I judged this meeting's issues to be a very pressing,
Yeah.
timely, much more pressing, timely, and then so I just allocated my time to that instead.
No problem. We put a lot of work on you and we appreciate your efforts. Any other old business?
I just wanted to make a comment. Bob said our next meeting was in 2 weeks. It's actually in 1 month.
Thank you. I was going to say that. I realized I misspoke.
Okay.
December, what's the meeting date?
8th, December 8th.
December 8th.
November, December are both moved up. So it seems like it's early, but they're both moved up. Yeah.
Yep.
So we get a longer time next time.
Yep.
So new business, the monthly expense and cash flow sheets, petty cash is $2,967. Treasurer's report as of October 31st, unencumbered balance at $253,008. Ending unencumbered cash balance $482,774. Received tax revenues of $246,706 and paid $2,465 in operating expenses and $14,476 paid to our loan to the city of Bellingham. Our current outstanding debt, and this is great, 10/31/2021, $289,878. We're making great progress. Those are all informational. Motion to approve the district payroll, wages for Robin, 30.25 hours in October, total gross $756.25. Do I hear a motion to?
I move.
I second.
Moved and seconded. All those in favor say aye and raise your right hand. Yeah, I see.
Aye.
Green, good, great. Consent agenda, motion to approve the following payments. Payment on October 15th of 2021, invoice 96284 from Carmichael and Clark, $1,370.50 for regular professional services. Payment to Katie Cash, check number 121 to Robin Albro for the October 29th, 2021. Order numbers 164751 for $250.50 for the ad for the legal section of the Bellingham Herald that ran October 31st through November 3rd. Motion to make those payments.
So moved.
Second.
Moved and seconded. All those in favor, raise your right hand, say aye.
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 Opposed, abstentions, hearing none, it passes unanimously. A reminder that Robin Albro will email 3 board members, Frank, John Hymas and John McLaughlin, will respond immediately with the consent agenda and payroll confirmations. The next meeting will be on second Wednesday, December 8th at 6 p.m. There are
Thanks,
more
Frank.
For the good of
Thank
the
you,
order.
Frank. Good job.
Yeah.
Thank you, team. I think we did a lot of good work tonight. I'm proud of the work we've done and the hard effort that's been put in by everybody, and Robin, especially for your unflagging and continuous support of our efforts. Thank you so much, Robin. And Bob, you too. Thanks. Thank you, my friend. We appreciate
Legal.
being here. Yay.
Thank you both. Okay, bye.
See y'all in a month.
Good night.
Meeting is adjourned.
Good night.
Bye.
Good night, everybody.
Night.
night.
Thank you.